Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Film Forum at Home. My name is Joseph Berger, and I am the Theater Operations and Events Manager here at Film Forum, a not-for-profit four-screen cinema in Manhattan's West Village, celebrating its 50th anniversary this year, 2020. I'm speaking to you all live from my office on Houston Street. This is our 5th virtual event while the theater is temporarily closed. So first and foremost, we wish you all health and happiness at this time. We are pleased to present on our virtual cinema platform Werner Herzog's new documentary, Nomad, in the Footsteps of Bruce Chatwin. If you have yet to see the film, please consider renting it at filmforum.org. Half of that rental fee goes directly to us at Film Forum. I'd like to welcome all of our members to the Zoom webinar portion of this event. If at any point during the discussion you'd like to ask a question, please go ahead and click that Q&A icon on your Zoom window. This will enable you to submit your question in writing directly to our moderator, Mike Maggiore. Mike will do his best to integrate your question into tonight's conversation, so please keep them succinct and relevant. I'd also like to welcome everyone else who's joining us via our live stream on our YouTube channel, Film Forum NYC. Please take a moment and subscribe. I see there are about 100 people joining us on YouTube, so thank you. Our moderator tonight is Mike Maggiore. Mike has been Film Forum's premieres programmer since 1994 and a colleague of mine now for 21 years yesterday. Hello, Mike. How are you?
Hi. Good. How are you, Joe?
I'm doing great. We're looking forward to tonight's conversation. We'll run about an hour. I'll see you at the end.
Great. Thanks, Joe. Welcome, everyone. I want to say I program the premieres at Film Forum with director Karen Cooper and deputy director Sonia Chung. And it's our honor to welcome a filmmaker whose work Film Forum has shown for over 4 decades. Werner Herzog is an actor, filmmaker, and opera director whose films, while often blurring the lines between fiction and nonfiction, explore the extremities of landscapes and the human experience. With Nomad, in the Footsteps of Bruce Chatwin, Herzog retraces the journeys of his close friend, the legendary writer and adventurer whose books In Patagonia and The Songlines brought travel writing to imaginative new heights. As someone who has spent his career chasing his obsessions around the globe, Herzog found a kindred soul in Chatwin, who pursued the provenance of a presumed brontosaurus skin all the way to a cave at the southern tip of Chile. Nomad is yet another outstanding documentary by Werner Herzog, and as Joe mentioned, it opened in our virtual cinema last Wednesday. We had hoped to open the film earlier this spring, but with the theater shut down since mid-March, we decided to make it available to audiences now. And we very much hope that New York City movie theaters will reopen soon. And if they do, we will be pleased to present this film on the big screen. If you have not seen it yet, we highly recommend renting it. Werner Herzog was kind enough to agree to participate in this virtual Q&A tonight, and he's joining us now from Los Angeles. Werner, you can start your video and unmute yourself.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes, we can see you. We can hear you. Welcome. Thanks so much for doing this, Werner. You know, one of the things that I like so much about this film, as I like about many of your films, is that you took a subject that was very close to you, and you have made a documentary that is not a traditional biography about your friend Bruce Chatwin. And I wanted to start things off just by mentioning that in the film, you talk about how you and Bruce Chatwin met in Australia in 1983 when he was researching the songlines and you were researching where the green ants dream. And you were both fascinated by Aboriginal mythology. Can you share with us exactly how the two of you met each other?
It was a strange coincidence because I was in Melbourne preparing a film that I shot in the very center of Australia, in Cobra Verde, where there's a lot of opal mines and very strange piles of white sand over miles and miles and miles of completely artificial landscape. And I read in a newspaper that Bruce Chatwin was introducing his book. I think it was On the Black Hill, a novel that is set in Wales, in Australia. And I wrote to the publisher, is Chatwin still here? And if so, please let him know I would like to talk to him. And they said, no, he's in the center and we cannot reach him. And they promised they would let him know. And all of a sudden I received a call from the publishing house. He's in, I think either in Alice Springs or in one of these places coming to Sydney within the next 1.5 hours. If you call that number, you might reach him. So I called the number and I said, are you Bruce Chatwin? Yes. And he knew about me. He knew films. And it turned out he was en route with his leather rucksack. And sometimes he would carry a few books with him. And among the books that he carried with him was a book that I wrote when I traveled on foot from Munich to Paris once. It's called Off Walking in Ice. And he loved this book and he had it with him. And I said, can you divert your trip instead of Sydney and then back home to England? I said, can you make a stopover in Melbourne? And he said, yes, and told me when he was arriving, and I picked him up. But I asked him, how do you look like? I have no idea how to recognize you. And he said, I'm tall and I'm blonde and I'm looking like a schoolboy and I wear a leather rucksack. So from half a mile away, I could tell this was him coming along to the gate. And from then on, we barely said hello. He started to tell stories, but I mean, compulsory, like a waterfall. And since I'm full of good stories, I have many a good story in me as well. I would chime in, but it was very hard to squeeze anything into it because he was breathlessly telling the next story already before he completely had finished the last one. Or he would do some sort of wild shrieking, which sounded either like laughter or pain or whatever. Normally it was laughter. He had this very strange shriek when something was particularly wild. And I stopped for a moment thinking, what is he shrieking? Is he in pain or what happens? So, and taking his breath, he would instantly tell the next story. So it was a 48-hour marathon where we went to sleep for 5-6 hours, and at breakfast we would just continue. Mm-hmm. And he would continue the sentence that he has left half finished of the evening before. 48 hours nonstop.
I think you mentioned in the film that sometimes you'd walk into a house already talking, already in a conversation.
Yes, he would leave the car, and before he even entered the house where there was a party, he started to tell a story already and walked into the party in the middle of a story. And everybody would fall silent and look. He had this very great gift of mimicking and imitating voices. I mean, it was incredible. He could do incredible voice impersonatings, and he would speak in different voices of the protagonists of his stories. So it's phenomenal. So you can tell that man was a storyteller.
And so what was the occasion for you to make this film? Were you approached by BBC to...
I never planned to do the film because there are certain things that are living in you and dormant in you, and you do not need to make a film. But 2 years ago or so, the BBC contacted me and they said, we are planning a film. Bruce Chatwin died 40 years ago. And commemorating this date, the BBC would like to make a documentary, but we don't want to engage our cultural program and only having talking heads. And I said, thanks God you approached me, because I'm the one who should do the film. And one thing had to be clear: I'm not going to do a biography. It will not be a biography. And I think I make it pretty clear in the very beginning of the film, Nomad, that this is not a biography. It's a film about encounters, about fascinations, about big subjects, big issues, big things, about a common worldview, a view about nomadic life, a view about all sorts of things, how to tell a story, how to captivate an audience, how to encounter adversity. All these were things that should be part of the film, not a biography. And the BBC said, oh, thanks God, yes, something different all of a sudden. And I said, just let me do it. And they actually had a very, very intelligent and nice network executive who was partially en route with me, Richard Bright. I name his name because he was so particularly special and intelligent and warm. I mention his name because he passed away a few weeks ago, very suddenly at the age of 51. Oh, so I miss him. And tonight, I would like to mention his name and dedicate this evening to him, because he had a wonderful hand of guidance and of accepting the wildest things. And I asked, we need to find archival footage of this or that. And he would do somersaults forwards and backwards to provide it to me and get the rights cleared. And so normally relationships with network executives is sobering, but in this case it was very, very special.
Sounds very supportive.
Yeah.
You mentioned the archival materials. The film is rich in archival photography. I mean, you're drawing from a wealth of photographs of nomadic peoples, Aboriginal tribes, and landscapes in Patagonia. But it struck me that there are actually very few photographs of, or film footage of Bruce Chatwin that you included in the film. And I was wondering if that's because there's little footage of him that exists, or if you wanted his words to speak for his presence.
Well, there are quite a few interviews that he gave, also in particular to the BBC, done in the 1970s, but they are unwatchable. They're very, very stiff, like in the 60s or 70s. This kind of academic or professorial approach, and indigestible, intelligent ones, but indigestible. So I tried to find rather his voice when he reads from his books. But unfortunately, what he read mostly is in Patagonia, which put him on the map, and it's a classic, and you can find it under Penguin Classics, and it has sold more than 1 million times by now. So, but some elements he would not read, and they were important for my film. So I said, I'm reading it for him. And I was asked by friends, can you just step into his footsteps and read instead of him? Or, for example, the very end of the film, I'm reading the end of songlines. And I said, I'm proud to do it. I have no problem whatsoever to read it, because he cannot read it for us. So I would do it. And I think the way I read it is a kind of voice Bruce would have liked.
Oh, I'm sure he would have. And everyone loves. I mean, you have a unique voice, and it's always an element of your films.
It is not self-serving. It has to serve songlines. It has to serve Bruce Chatwin. It has to have the gravitas of a man who is dying.
Well, the film begins as your film begins as in Patagonia begins, with the hunt for the skin of a brontosaurus, or so he thought when he was a boy. and it leads Chatwin to a cave in southern Chile. You show this cave in the present day, and it's become a draw for fellow obsessives. What do you think this says about the influence of that book, and given that it was first published in 1977?
Well, it has had a huge practical influence on people who want to see the cave where actually a piece of brontosaurus, not brontosaurus, but of a giant sloth that died out 10,000 years ago. And since the sand in the cave is so dry and the climate so arid, it actually survived 10,000 years. And he had a piece of that. And another piece, the main piece now, is in a museum in Punta Arenas. And the cave, because of his book, became famous. So there are many people seeing it. Or, for example, the Welsh colony in Argentina has become very, very famous, and lots of people are joining them because they speak pure Welsh. They were immigrants in the 19th century, and they speak a pure form of Welsh, clearer and purer than people in Wales nowadays would speak, because there was some hiatus in speaking it. So it has had quite a few repercussions. And of course, his book, Songlines, has triggered a lot of response in the Aboriginal community and in the scientific community of anthropology. And I'm sure he was not completely right, but it doesn't matter. It is his view of it. Mm-hmm. And it's so complex that we can only stand there in awe and listen to Aborigines telling us about it. Mm-hmm. And that's what I basically do.
Yeah. Nicholas Shakespeare, who is Chatwin's biographer, shows you a copy of your screenplay of Cobra Verde, which was based on one of Chatwin's novels. And the screenplay seems to have annotations by Chatwin all over it, but yeah, it's the first time you've actually seen it with his comments. And I'm just wondering if Chatwin ever gave you any kind of separate feedback about the script.
No. It's very strange, because he wrote with very fine pencil at the margins, or sometimes in between the lines. He even changed some of the names of the protagonists, although they correspond with his names. Anyway, so it's a lot of annotations. He never sent it to me. And I have been asked, yeah, did you read it? No, I said, no, it's irrelevant. Scholars should read it. I'm totally pleased with how I dealt with his book. And I let him know in the beginning, his book, The Viceroy of Widor, is narrated in concentric circles. A special technique in narrating. And I said, films are much more linear. Bruce, do you have a problem if I make a much more linear story for my film? He said, no, go ahead. I won't interfere at all. And he never wanted to interfere from his side. And he was on the set in Ghana already kind of busy dying. And he said to me, Werner, I cannot travel. And when he was feeling a little bit better, you have to get me a wheelchair. And I wrote to him, Bruce, wheelchair in this terrain, in this rugged terrain, that's no good. I will have 6 hammockers for you and the umbrella bearer. They have these huge umbrellas for the kings in Ghana. And so he came and he witnessed a fortnight of shooting, and he was very content and very pleased, because I did staging of a real king with 450 of his entourage, his real entourage, dancers, and his court poet, and his wives, his 52 wives, and his courtiers, and his drummers. And Bruce had never seen anything like that. And he said, Werner, such a wonderful thing that you got that on the screen. Mm-hmm. So he saw the film and he was content with the film. And so that's all we have to say.
Yeah. One of the things I thought was striking just in watching this film now is that you remarked that Chatwin thought Homo sapiens may not have much longer to live. And you show a photo of the last nomadic people in Tierra del Fuego, which is just a bit chilling to see right now and at this time in our planet's history. And I'm just wondering what you think Chatwin would have made of not just the pandemic, but climate change, the way the direction the planet is going in right now.
Well, I think there is a variety of reasons that may extinguish us as a race. We are very fragile biologically, much more fragile than, for example, a lizard or a crocodile or a cockroach that will even survive an atomic blast. And of course, a lot of self-created means of our demise. Climate change is only one. Nuclear holocaust is another one. But let's say if we are hit by a big meteorite, and my very last film is now on meteorites, which will be published soon in mid-November by Apple.
Your new film, Fireball, which...
Fireball, yes, Visitors from Darker Worlds. But it's coming 13th of November. Let's not talk about it. But a big meteoritic event which extinguished 90% of all species on our planet, in particular the dinosaurs and many of the mammals. And because of that, humans or mammals found a niche of evolution which were not endangered by dinosaurs. So we owe it to a meteorite or a huge bolide, an asteroid that hit us. And it hit us with a force of hundreds and hundreds of millions atomic bombs, Hiroshima size. But we can go extinct very quickly by if we have a blackout worldwide for whatever reason. Or a blackout of the internet because our water supply, electricity, food supplies, everything is ruled and organized via the internet. So we would have, we could not make any transactions anymore with money. We could not, we have to go back to hunting and gathering. But imagine a city of Manhattan, I don't know, 6 million, 8 million. Yes, go out hunting, good luck. There's Central Park and you've got 420 squirrels. Hunt them, good luck to you. So it would be very, very quickly the end of us. And of course, we all know that we are very fragile. And
we know that
become fragile when we abandoned a nomadic lifestyle, which was an inevitable sort of thing. And it happened about 10,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago. And of course, sedentary life set in and urban life set in and science and population growth, which is killing us. And an attitude of consumerism, which is going to kill us because we are overusing our resources.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that note, I want to we're going to start taking questions from the audience. This is the audience who has joined our Zoom meeting. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in our Q&A section of your Zoom screen. And but I want to ask one more question, Werner, which is about the music in the film. The great composer and cellist Ernst Reisiger, I think.
A Dutch composer and cellist, yeah.
He's performed many of the evocative and haunting music that accompanies some just astonishing shots in this film of Neolithic structures and landscapes. You've worked with him on several films, including The White Diamond and Cave of Forgotten Dreams. And I'm just wondering what it is about his work.
The Wild Blue Yonder, in particular, feature film, crazy feature film. Anyway, yes.
Yeah, so what is it about his work that you feel blends so well with your sensibility?
I think his music has qualities that are without precedent. There's no one like him, number one. And it's a fresh and very daring approach to music and to music in films. And he is capable of enhancing, lifting up images to a different level. He can transform images, an entire world with his music into images. Of course, I create the images, but they acquire a different quality. And I had a similar relationship with Florian Fricke or Popol Vuh in early films. But we started to drift apart after some 10 or so films or 15 films, because he moved more into kind of new age approach in his thinking, which I never liked. It's a quasi pseudo philosophical babble, and if music drifts away into some new agey sort of feel good sounds, it's not my thing anymore, and we kind of drifted apart. And for me, a great discovery was Ernst Reisiger.
Yeah,
it's a very ingenious man.
Okay, we have some questions. Actually, starting with a wish of happy almost birthday, Werner. From
thank you. Yes, don't do it too early. It brings bad luck.
Okay.
Yeah, otherwise, I kick the bucket in the next 48 hours or step on a landmine.
So Sperling asks, you mentioned encounters for Chatwin, and you've titled your Antarctica film Encounters at the End of the World, which we showed. Would you say that the joy is in the journey, and that it is better to travel hopefully than to arrive?
Yes, there's a similar approach to traveling. You see, Antarctica doesn't matter where it is, but this encounter with incredible people who all have a big vision, scientific vision, and it's all sorts of fields, from scientists who are after neutrinos, or scientists who study biology of the Antarctic continent, or penguins, or me. I went there because I was fascinated by underwater footage under the ice shelf of the Ross Shelf. And it's about 30 feet thick ice, and under it an ocean, which is science fiction. It's absolute and pure science fiction, and I wanted to go there and film. But of course, it's very dangerous, because you have to get through the borehole again up to the world of breathing air and solid ice. So they wouldn't allow me, but I had a wonderful musician who has also cooperated with me, Henry Kaiser, who is also a very, very professional diver, and he brought me there. And he did the underwater footage for me, and I shot all the rest of the film. But the approach and the joy of filmmaking and the joy of discovery and the awe of a location, that's all that Chatwin had in him. And I think Encounters at the End of the World and Nomad are brother and sister.
Eric says, I love your documentaries and intense scripted features. What mix of personality traits and experiences do you attribute to ending up focusing on those genres?
I don't really make a distinction between the genres. I've said it very often. For me, the line is blurred, because I do things that you normally do not do in documentaries. I script them, I direct them, I really direct them. I do casting, very careful casting. Casting, for example, you will see in Nomad as well. It's very well cast. Who is on camera with me? So that's quite important. And sometimes I would repeat something. I would say to Nicholas Shakespeare, well, your answer was 32 minutes long. It has to be condensed. Let's condense it. Let's do it once more. And I would shoot again. So I do things that you normally would not do in a documentary. And I do it for the sake of a condensed, of a deeper, a more ecstatic truth, as I call it. And I do modify facts. I modify facts to such a degree that they resemble truth more than reality. That's what actually a French writer, André Gide, once said. And Bruce would do the same. And Nicholas Shakespeare says it very clearly. Bruce was always accused, you embellished this or that. Yes, he added things and he modified and sculpted, but it's crystal clear what he's describing now. And Shakespeare says something very nice in the film. Bruce never told the truth. He would always tell a truth and a half.
That's right.
And that's exactly what he's doing and what I'm doing.
Yeah. Chris asks the following question. Chatwin seems to have shared Herzog's obsession with the natural world. Did Chatwin agree with Herzog that nature is, quote, full of obscenity, vile and base, nothing but fornication and asphyxiation, as, unquote, as Herzog says in Burden of Dreams?
Well, we spoke a lot about the natural world and about our planet and the universe. And of course, he was completely and utterly unsentimental about it. And of course, we had an understanding. It's basically, it doesn't need a specific quote. Would he agreed on it? Yes, he would. I think he knew Burden of Dreams. So, but I think it's a worldview that we shared. We were on the same wavelength in many things. And there's a worldview out there which is not the Walt Disney worldview, where all of nature is sweet and nice, and the bears are fluffy, the bear cubs are fluffy, and the bear moms are nice and sweet and need to be hugged, and you need to sing a song to them. Mm-hmm. So, of course, he was abhorred by these ideas. And I make it clear in my film Grizzly Man. Now I do not accept. And in Grizzly Man, it's an ongoing argument that I'm having. Although Timothy Treadwell, who was killed and eaten by a bear, was not alive anymore, I still have an ongoing argument. And it's all right. And I could have an ongoing argument with Bruce Chatwin, although he's dead for 40 years now. Sometimes in my mind, I argue with him. And I argue in particular about song lines.
And how so?
Because I have listened to voices of Aborigines that he had not heard. And I know the caveats that they have in publishing a book, a very famous book on Aboriginal songs, a collection of songs. And I have heard modern research, very recent research into the songlines and concepts of dream time. In other words, stay at a distance and accept what you hear and accept that you probably will never understand anything or only a part of it, general things. So we don't need to have one specific quote verified or not. In this case that you have quoted, yes, he would have liked it.
Eric asks, speaking of Disney, how do you end up in other people's work, such as Disney's Star Wars TV show, The Mandalorian? Seeing you as an Imperial agent was the best surprise of that show.
Well, I never volunteered. I never did any casting. I was dragged into it. And in this case by Jon Favreau, who is the grey eminence and the father of all this series. And he invited me with very, very serious arguments. Number one, the screenplay, which I read and looked, or the screenplays, which looked intelligent. And secondly, for me, the question is, can I deliver? Would I be good as a bad guy, the character you cannot trust in? Yes, I can do it, and you can see it in Jack Reacher, for example. Yes, I can deliver. And I had the feeling there was a new way of filmmaking also involved, moving away from green screen and bringing film back where it should be, where it always has been, where both the actors and the camera see the planet on which you are moving and on which you are walking and acting. So it's filmmaking back to its origins and where it always is at its best. So, and it's very funny because it was only a job of a few days, and all of a sudden I make one little remark about one character, Baby Yoda, literally half a sentence, an aside in half a sentence, and I get tens of millions of comments in the internet. So it distracts a little bit from my real job. And my real job we are discussing here. I'm a filmmaker, but I'm all right. I love everything that has to do with cinema, including acting.
There is a moment in Nomad wherein you have found a partial set from a Star Wars film in the Australian desert. Is that right?
Yes, in Cobra Verde.
Mm-hmm. But it wasn't clear to me what that was. It was.
I have no idea what it was because I never saw any of the films, and I think erroneously in the film, my commentary says some relic from a Star Wars, but I got an email and saying that was not Star Wars, it was something else. For me, all of that is Star Wars. Just take it as it is. And don't be an accountant and tell me you were wrong here. Yes, it was sitting there, and in Cobra Verde, I was actually filming my film, Where the Green Ants Dream. Mm-hmm. And that this film was the reason I ran into Bruce Chatwin physically.
Right. Andrew has a question on walking. Does it have to involve an adventure to a distant peak, or can you be a walker in your own familiar city?
You can be anywhere. It doesn't matter, but please don't walk to be the first one to conquer Mount Everest or Dhaulagiri or Lhotse or whatever. That's silly and should be ad acta since the 50s. It has become a nuisance. And when you see the photos of Mount Everest of hundreds and hundreds, body after body lining up to reach the summit, it's frightening today. So, but I mean real traveling in the ancient sense of the word, before we had automobiles or trains or airplanes, or before we would use horses. And that means more like a nomadic attitude. And I'm not into walking, let's say, a trodden trail like the Appalachian Trail, which is marked and you have campgrounds every 20 miles or so. I'm not into that. And I'm a lazy bum like everyone else. But I would travel on foot when there's something existentially important for me. For example, my mentor, Lotte Eisner, was 80, dying in Paris. I wouldn't allow her to die. And unbeknownst to her, I came on foot and she was out of hospital. Or things like that, you see. And I'm not into the kind of backpacking. I do not carry my tent in my whole household. Tent and mattress and sleeping bag and cooking pots and food supplies with me. I'm not. I have the bare minimum and I have to find shelter. And I have to knock at the door of a farmhouse. Can I sleep in the hay in your barn? Or can you fill my canteen with water because I'm very, very thirsty? So, and all of a sudden, all the encounters become essentials. There's no small talk anymore. And I keep saying, and that was what Bruce always loved about my traveling on foot, the world reveals itself to those who travel on foot. I can only say it as a dictum.
That's your dictum, yeah.
And Bruce always liked it.
That makes sense. There's a question from Maya, which I'm going to condense. Chatwin was one of the great contemporary travelers, and you, Werner, seem almost preordained to make a movie about him. Your films stage and frame collisions between cultures in both theme and form, in terms of what is depicted and in how you represent them. How do you think images as points of cultural contact have changed over the course of your filmmaking career?
Well, that's a deep question, and much of it is a commentary, a kind commentary. So I think I'm thankful for the question. But of course, my attitude to traveling, and I'm not a traveler, and be careful, 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 careful. Please don't call Chatwin a travel writer. He kept saying to me, oh my God, if I ever end up in the bookstores in the travel section, my book next to Thailand for $5 a day, I would rotate in my grave. So let's not call him a travel writer. It's a worldview. And the worldview derived from being on foot in Patagonia or in the Australian outback. But of course, in a way, much has remained stable because the world and the way it reveals itself has not changed its attitude. And very early events in my life in traveling on foot, like the 10,000 windmills, a key image in Signs of Life, my first feature film, my first narrative feature film. It's still, and I witnessed it when I was 16 or 17. And I looked down on the island of Crete into a valley, and there are literally 10,000 windmills, nothing else, like flowers going completely crazy. And I knew I was insane. And I had to sit down and collect myself and climb down, and they were real. And it was more than dreams. It was something that revealed itself, which was big and which was triggered a whole movie. And that has not changed. Images have triggered whole movies, like footage that I saw from under the ice in Antarctica. It was such a shock of vision that actually 2 films originated out of it. The Wild Blue Yonder feature film, where it's a foreign planet, and part of Encounters of the End of the World. So it hasn't changed because the world is still of the weirdest and strangest and most awesome surprises. And I'm always open for it. And always my cinema has a quality of awe. If there's no awe, I should not make films. And if there's no awe, Chatwin shouldn't publish in Patagonia, but just read it. And my feeling is, if there's one single viewer of the film, one single person who watches us now, who says, oh yeah, in Patagonia, I tell you, go and buy it. It's at Penguin Classics. If one person starts to read Chatwin, we have won the battle.
That seems like a perfect place to close this. And but before we let you go, we chatted just before we went live here, and you told me you've been doing okay during the pandemic. But what have you been doing to keep yourself busy? You're in Los Angeles now, and are you working on scripts?
Yeah, part of the lockdown I used for editing my last film. You see, I made Nomad in the footsteps of Bruce Chatwin, but I also, in between, shot a feature film in Japan, Family Romance LLC, which is available on streaming at Mubi. But I also finished a film, I filmed last year until December. And during the lockdown, I was lucky I could edit the film. And it will be released, but I was done with the film in April. So since then, I cannot venture out with a camera, so I'm writing. I'm writing prose texts, I'm writing poetry, and I would like to remind the audience, books, prose books like Conquest of the Useless or Of Walking in Ice will probably have a longer life than all my movies. So I may be wrong. I have been wrong many times, but I write and I enjoy it, and I should write much more. So that's how. There's not a single moment of boredom and feeling enclosured. Put me in a prison cell, and it wouldn't be boring for a second, as long as I can write.
I can't imagine you ever getting bored, Werner. Well, I just want to thank you so much for joining us for this and for sharing your experiences in working on this film and knowing Bruce Chatwin. It's a beautiful.
Thanking you. I thank you and the audience who has been patient, and my thank to Film Forum, because you have shown some of my best in some of my difficult films, and those that others wouldn't show, and you have been very loyal. So I thank you for that.
Well, thank you. All right.
All right. Goodbye.
Good night.
Good night to all.
Bye, Werner. Thank you, Mike, for a wonderful conversation. And I'm just going to say a few words before we leave here. I want to thank, once again, Werner Herzog, and congratulations on the new film. Thank you to all of our viewers tonight, especially our Film Forum members, and all the support that you've shown us over the years. Again, I encourage all of you to go to our website, filmforum.org, to rent Werner's film, Nomad, in the Steps of Bruce Chatwin. I'd also like to thank everyone at Music Box Films and everyone on the Film Forum staff who helped put this event together, especially our director, Karen Cooper. If you enjoyed today's event, please consider making a donation to Film Forum's COVID-19 Emergency Fund and help us reopen our doors in the hopefully near future. You can do so by going to filmforum.org/support. Finally, please stay connected to us via our newsletter and our social media handle Film Forum NYC at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We will keep you all up to date with additions to our virtual cinema roster and any upcoming virtual events. Again, we wish you all health and happiness. Have a wonderful evening.